Good morning, Europe. You are watching Europe Today. The impact of gender-based violence on the lives of women is often severe. Health consequences include not only immediate physical injuries, but also long-term gynecological problems, sexually transmitted infections, depression, substance abuse, and even suicide. Economic costs are also not negligible, with women often being unable to work due to physical or psychological damage. The high-income Nordic country has topped the World Economic Forum's global gender equality rankings for 15 years in a row, and for the past half-century, women and men have been equally likely to lead the country. But the island nation's international reputation comes with a striking caveat. A major new analysis shows about 40% of Icelandic women have been sexually or physically assaulted, and many are grappling with post-traumatic stress disorder (PTSD). What you would expect is that in a country with high gender equality, you would see lower victimization rates, Rannveig Sigurvinsdóttir, an associate professor of psychology at Reykjavik University said. The study, published in the journal JAMA Network Open, surveyed about 28,200 women ages 18 to 69 in Iceland, asking whether they had experienced life stressors such as stillbirth, having a child taken away, divorce, or discrimination and humiliation. 2 in 3 women said they had either witnessed or were a direct victim of unwanted sexual experiences, making it the most common life stressor, followed by life-threatening illness or injuries 58.1%, and accidents, fires, or explosions 51.1%. The researchers behind the study at the University of Iceland also assessed the respondents' PTSD symptoms, and found that overall 15.9% of women had probable PTSD. Women who had been sexually assaulted or held captive were more likely to have probable PTSD than women who experienced any other life stressor, including having a child taken away, a sudden violent death, or experiencing a natural disaster. Sigurvinsdóttir cautioned that the prevalence data may be slightly inflated, because people with a history of sexual violence could be more likely to complete the survey, but said the study underscores that sexual violence appears to be a significant contributor to PTSD. That's been replicated across the Western world many times, she said. The big 2 groups that suffer the most PTSD, just from the literature, are women who've been victimized sexually and veterans. Sexual violence was more traumatic for women who were first attacked when they were younger than 12 years old, and for those who were assaulted by a partner or relative, such as a parent, the study found. We found a substantial proportion of women who experienced PTSD decades after the last assault, lending support to the chronicity of PTSD after exposure to such trauma, the study authors said. It follows a smaller study published last year that identified similar trends but included both men and women. Women were nearly 4 times as likely as men to be victims of sexual violence, and women were also more likely to experience other unwanted sexual encounters, the study found. Another analysis in Iceland found that women who had experienced sexual violence in the workplace were more likely to have depression, anxiety, attempt suicide, have sleep problems, and binge drink. Taken together, the results call Iceland's reputation for gender equality into question, but it isn't the only high-income Nordic country to have a problem with this kind of violence. Finland, Denmark, and Sweden all report higher lifetime levels of sexual or physical assault compared with the rest of Europe, the study noted. However, there are some nuances to the Nordic paradox, with Sigurvinsdóttir explaining that people there may be more willing to disclose their assaults, partly explaining the higher rates. Further, when Spanish researchers dug into current rates of intimate partner violence in European countries, the disparity between Nordic and other countries narrowed substantially. It seems that the Nordic paradox only applies when you look at lifetime victimization, Sigurvinsdóttir said. That could be because people in the Nordics tend to have more partners over their lifetimes, effectively creating more opportunities for abusive relationships to occur, not because men there are inherently more violent. The researchers from the Centre de Estudis Demographics CED and the Universitat Pompeu Fabra concluded. That might tell us that gender equality doesn't really relate to violence happening, but it relates to how society responds to it, Sigurvinsdóttir said. In other words, violence against women happens regardless of whether society prioritizes gender equality, suggesting that stamping out violence is a distinct cultural and policy challenge. In recent years, the Icelandic government has increased funding for a women's shelter, funded public awareness campaigns, and made amendments to the criminal code to clarify digital sexual violence and stalking. It also amended the definition of rape in 2018 to emphasize consent, according to the Human Rights Committee of the United Nations. Sigurvinsdottir said more work is needed to address the problem. For example, a speedier criminal justice process for victims of violence, more public services to support victims, and efforts to bridge gaps between the country's public health care system and mental health care. Also key is the social support that victims get or don't get in the wake of violence. Her research in Iceland shows that when someone receives a negative reaction after disclosing their sexual assault, they are much more likely to have poor mental health. But she also found that people who shared their experiences with a friend, family member, or someone else were significantly more likely to get a positive reaction than a negative one. I think people are slowly realizing how common trauma is, and how serious the implications can be, Sigurvinsdottir said. Thanks for watching Europe Today.